We're good to go.
We're good to go?
Yeah, we can start.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed Asuyuti. I work at the Adaptation Fund Board Secretariat as a Senior Climate Change Specialist, and I have the honor to moderate this event today. This event today is organized by the Adaptation Fund as part of the Gobashana Global Conference. This is the second time that we've been organizing this event, and we thank the Gobashana team for the invitation. The event is today about the challenges and opportunities in the monitoring of the locally led adaptation initiatives. We'll have the chance to hear from our local partners who are implementing our projects on the ground. So we'll have a colleague from the South African National Biodiversity Institute from South Africa. We'll have also a colleague from Funde Corporation in Costa Rica, and as well as someone from our CSO network, the NGO Adaptation Fund Network. The agenda is pretty packed, so we'll have a chance to hear from the head of the Adaptation Fund in a few minutes. But before doing so, I just want you to type any question that you have in the chat, so my colleague Catherine will have a chance to look at those, and we'll have an opportunity to respond to those questions at the end. So without further ado, let me introduce Mikko Likainen, who is the head of the Adaptation Fund. So Mikko, over to you for your introductory remarks. Thanks.
Thank you, Mohammed. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, participants, partners, and colleagues. I'd like to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the organizers of the very important Gobashana conference. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Adaptation Fund session on challenges and opportunities in the monitoring of locally led adaptation initiatives. I'm positive this session will be a good opportunity to share valuable knowledge within the global adaptation community to inform the design and implementation of local activities and decision-making in adaptation projects and programs. The Adaptation Fund has been supporting local actions since it became operational in 2010. As of today, the fund has supported nearly 140 concrete projects covering over 100 countries with $1 billion committed to date. Since the beginning, the Adaptation Fund has supported actions that benefit the local level and have a meaningful local involvement, and supporting locally led and locally based adaptation is a cross-cutting area of the fund's strategy. Local actors, including local governments, civil society, and communities, have the best understanding of the circumstances in their area, and it's therefore crucial that all Adaptation Fund projects are informed by that local knowledge to shape the project activities so as to best meet their needs and to avoid risks that might otherwise result from not understanding their context. And I'm very pleased that we have two champions in this area, Mandy Barnett from Zambia, South Africa, and Marianela Feoli from Funde Cooperación, Costa Rica, with us today to share their experience. Thank you so much for being with us. Putting the local actors in the decision-making role also empowers them in building their own resilience, which is crucial for climate justice and for enhancing sustainability of project outcomes after the project end. It can also strengthen the civil society, and I'm very happy that we have on our panel today a representative of the Adaptation Fund CSO network, which is Mariam Devidze from Green Alternative from Georgia. Since its inception, the Adaptation Fund has pioneered the direct access modality in which developing countries can access climate finance directly through their own country institutions and systems, which empowers ownership in adaptation. The Adaptation Fund also pioneered the enhanced direct access modality in which decision-making authority is further devolved to the local level, so that resources can even better match the needs and capacities at that level, thus further empowering national implementing entities and local stakeholders. The environmental and social policy of the fund also plays a key role in building local inclusion in project formulation. by reinforcing existing requirements on meaningful consultation with all intended stakeholders. In the past decade, as the volume of adaptation finance has increased and early investments have matured, the role of local leadership in pursuing effective action has come to the fore. Emerging perspectives suggest that vulnerable groups and local actors can deliver effective adaptation action when they are empowered to put into practice the solutions that work best for them. As part of the collaboration with the Global Commission on Adaptation, the Adaptation Fund produced a study titled Local Leadership in Adaptation Finance that showcases common successful threads in several of its projects that highlight the importance of local led action in adaptation in building resilience to climate change among vulnerable communities. In addition, the Adaptation Fund was one of the first organizations to endorse the global principles of locally led adaptation a few years ago. Our very first pilot enhanced direct access projects carried out by Zambi in South Africa nearly a decade ago showed successes and provided valuable knowledge in empowering local actors to climate-proof infrastructure and vulnerable farmers to take steps to improve their lives while enhancing ecosystems and offering sustainable and resilient solutions to drought and other climate challenges. And we've come a long way since then. At the same time, Zambi, through their pioneering approach, were able to point out some of the challenges that are involved in devolving decision-making to the local level. While we understand that it's extremely important for the longer-term sustainability to involve the local organizations, now we also know that it requires specific capacity building, which in turn takes time and resources, and we're grateful to these national partners for learning these lessons and sharing them with us and with the wider audience. We now have a specific enhanced direct access funding window that is available to national implementing entities, in addition to our regular country funding and other funding windows that are fostering locally led adaptation, in addition to our regular projects, which are inherently local as well. Through this session, we are pleased to share insights together with the speakers from our partner organizations on how efficient monitoring of enhanced direct access projects and programs is aiming to support successful locally led adaptation measures and strategies. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the session and find it useful.
Thank you, Mikko. And as you have said, the fund has been pioneering the direct access modality since the beginning. And we have today with us some of our partners that have been implementing locally led adaptation actions for more than a decade. But before going into the panel, I would like to share with you a short video that outlines the work of the Adaptation Fund on locally led adaptation, and that will give you a bit of what the fund has been doing and showing some results on the locally led adaptation. So I don't know if my colleagues from the COM can put up the video.
The Adaptation Fund is a strong proponent of locally led adaptation and recently launched new funding windows and enhanced direct access to foster LLA on the ground, as well as in innovation to encourage local actors to innovate new approaches in adaptation. Adaptation Fund head Mikko Ollikainen speaks of the importance of LLA.
Locally led adaptation is a theme that is gathering a lot of attention at the moment. It means that ownership of adaptation actions is entrusted with the local communities and other local stakeholders. Enhanced direct access is one type of locally led adaptation. In enhanced direct access, those funds are held by the national organization, and that is what makes it such a unique way of funding adaptation activities. In everything that the Adaptation Fund finances in developing countries, the local aspects are taken into account. There are comprehensive consultation processes that ensure that the views of different segments of the society are taken into account, including including the vulnerable communities. In locally led adaptation, we emphasize that, and the decision on which types of activities are funded at the local level is especially pronounced, so that the specific projects are designed and chosen by those local communities.
Thank you. So as I was saying, this is a short video that outlines the work of the fund on LLA. Now, today, since we're discussing about the opportunities and challenges on monitoring and local adaptation, we believe that it's important for you to have a quick presentation on the fund result-based management framework, which is helping us to monitor our work on the ground, including the LLA. My colleague Martina Dorigo, who is climate change specialist at the Adaptation Fund Board Secretary, will have a short presentation on the fund result-based management framework. So Martina, over to you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Good morning, good afternoon to all the colleagues. In this presentation, I will talk about the result-based management of the Adaptation Fund and the opportunities for monitoring locally led adaptation. So just very briefly, the Adaptation Fund is the only global UN fund created to fund concrete adaptation projects and programs in the most vulnerable countries. As mentioned before, is one of the first fully functioning climate funds, which has been operating since 2007 and has pioneered the direct access and enhanced direct access climate finance modality. And as the urgency of climate change has risen, the Adaptation Fund investments have been gradually increased to almost up to $1 billion as of today. The board approved the new medium-term strategy of the Adaptation Fund, which will cover the period of 2023-2027. And in this slide, you can see the theory of change of the new medium-term strategy with a high-level goal, vision, and mission. Essentially, the board has decided to continue the three strategic areas of the fund, which are action, innovation, and learning and sharing, which are also complemented by 6 cross-cutting themes. So essentially, with the new medium-term strategy, there is an addition of new 2 cross-cutting themes. One is specifically on locally based and locally led adaptation, and the other one is on replicating and scaling up results. The fund experience, as it was mentioned before, pioneered the enhanced direct access modality, provides insights also to the devolution of decision-making to local level that can enable local leadership of adaptation and can provide useful lessons learned and best practices. So here a little bit an overview, a bird's eye view on the current Adaptation Fund funding opportunities, which are expected to be expanded under the new medium-term strategy. For a matter of time, I will focus mostly on the strategic area of action, where probably you already know that the most traditional way of channeling funds has been towards funding concrete regular adaptation projects for up to $10 million per country. In addition to that, there is a regional funding window for projects implemented in 2 or more neighboring countries in the same UN region that are sharing the same adaptation challenge. But also the medium-term strategy that was introduced in the former medium-term strategy and will be continued in the next medium-term strategy and further strengthened is a dedicated funding window for enhanced direct access, which is dedicated currently just to the national implementing entities to implement projects up to $5 million US. with the new medium-term strategy, there is a consideration to have an additional funding window specifically on locally led adaptation, taking into account the fund current experiences on local actions, including the enhanced direct access and direct access funding modalities. So probably there is thinking on whether the new funding window on locally led adaptation can be expanded to potentially multilateral implementing entities and regional implementing entities, for them also to implement this kind of project on locally led adaptation. A little bit of a bird eye view on the regional distribution of investments of the Adaptation Fund. As you can see, the largest amount of investments have been allocated to the Africa region, with 51 projects totaling more than $400 million, followed by Asia Pacific with 275.8 million, followed closely by the LAC region with 271.1 million, and Eastern Europe with the investments totaling almost $30 million. So the total portfolio, as was mentioned before, counts with nearly 140 projects totaling almost $1 billion in investments. Of these, 42 projects are implemented by national implementing entities, so through the direct access modality. And of these, 5 projects are implemented with enhanced direct access modality. And of these, of some of these projects, we will actually hear later in the panel discussion. Now, a little bit digging into the result-based management framework of the Adaptation Fund. Well, it operates at 3 main levels. First of all, the Secretariat and the Board receive guidance from the CMP and the CMA. At the portfolio level, this monitoring is carried out by the Secretariat. We aggregate, for this, we aggregate information and keep a track on the portfolio impact and the progress of the portfolio, and produce every year an annual performance report. And then the third level is the monitoring conducted at project and program level, which is carried out by each executing entity and is supervised by the implementing entities. Here, project and project level objectives should be aligned also with the outcomes of the strategic results framework of the Adaptation Fund. At fund level, we have 2 impact level results and 5 associated core indicators, which we will see a little bit more in detail in the following slide. And at project level, we have key outcomes and associated outputs to which, as I mentioned before, the projects need to be aligned to. Now, here you can see the aggregation of the core indicators as of June 30, 2022. Why as of June 30? Because this is basically the period in that corresponds to the period of the annual performance report, of the last performance report. So we can see here that the fund, through its investment, benefited almost 36 million by beneficiaries, including direct and indirect beneficiaries. 516 early warning systems have been installed, and 99 policies have been introduced or adjusted to include climate change risks, and almost 600,000 hectares of natural habitats have been created, protected, or rehabilitated, and more than 160,000 meters of coastlines have been protected. A little bit of an overview also of the investments breaking down according to the results framework of the Adaptation Fund. As you can see here, highlighted in light gray, are the outcomes towards which the largest amount of funds have been channeled so far in the latest years. And this corresponds to the concrete investments. In fact, outcome 4 is associated with the increased adaptive capacity within relevant development and natural resources sectors. The outcome 5 is associated with the increased ecosystem resilience in response to climate change, and outcome 6 refers to the diversified and strengthened livelihoods of the targeted vulnerable people. Now, a little bit digging into now the reporting requirements of the Adaptation Fund. And for a sake of time, I will just focus on the project performance reports. The project performance reports are basically a monitoring tool that the implementing entities they need to submit to the Secretariat on a yearly basis, because the Secretariat and the Adaptation Fund operates on a performance-based disbursement approach. So it means that the funds are not given all at once after a project is approved, but are allocated following a disbursement schedule, which is included in the proposal. And the tranches, of course, are defined by the implementing entity at project submission stage. So after the clearance of the performance of the project performance report, the fund disburses the following tranche of funds. Now, digging a little bit into some sections of this project performance report. In the project performance report, there are a few areas which are highlighted in light green in this slide, which provide an opportunity also to track locally led adaptation, especially the section to check the compliance of the project with respect to the environmental and social policy and gender policy during project implementation, on which I will focus more later, and the rating section, which provides the executing entities also an opportunity to express a self-rating on the progress achieved and the justification also for this rating. In addition, the session on lessons learned can really provide rich information and provides the implementing entity an opportunity to describe if there were any issues encountered during the project implementation and what were the mitigation actions put forward by the entity to overcome these issues. In addition, the implementing entity can list any lessons learned specific to gender and highlight as well the role of women as key actors in climate change adaptation, and also what are the most successful aspects for the target communities. So now looking a little bit more in detail, the section on the environmental and social compliance and gender policy compliance during project implementation, the project performance report screens these sections. They have different subsections. First of all, we ask in the environmental and social policy compliance section we ask the implementing entity to tell us if there are any unidentified environmental and social risks which were materialized during a project implementation, and we ask the entity to tell us what are the mitigation measures that they put in place for these unanticipated risks. We also ask them about the efficiency and effectiveness of the implementation arrangements put forward by both the implementing entity and the executing entities with regard to the compliance, the environmental and social policy compliance. Similarly, for the compliance with the gender policy, we provide implementing entity with an opportunity to tell us, to share information if there were any gender issues encountered during project implementation, and what were the implementation arrangements also put forward by both implementing entity and executing entities for the gender policy compliance. In addition, as a fund, we pay particular attention to any grievance that might be raised during project implementation, and we ask the implementing entities to provide us information on the steps taken to solve any particular grievance, and if the steps taken were satisfactory for all the parties involved, and this, of course, both for the environmental and social policy and gender policy. Now, digging a little bit into the strategic results framework of the Adaptation Fund, Here, just reporting a few outcomes, not all the 8 outcomes of the fund, specifically those that focus more on tracking progress and results for locally led adaptation and subnational levels. So just a little bit of background, the strategic results framework of the fund was amended in March 2019, this following the approval of the previous medium-term strategy and its associated implementation plan to expand the results framework to cover the or to strengthen the areas of action introduced by the former medium-term strategy. So as you can see here, these outcomes reported and associated indicators or outputs and associated indicators are focused, for example, on strengthening institutional capacity of national and subnational entities. And this was specifically introduced to monitor the impacts of the project implemented through the enhanced access modality. We also check the strengthened awareness of target population and the percentage of beneficiaries which are effectively applying the adaptation measures proposed by a given project. And also we track the diversification of livelihoods and the diverse source of income that are generated for the vulnerable people targeted within a particular project. Now, just to conclude my presentation, in the result-based management of the Adaptation Fund, there are current developments. One of them is that the fund is transitioning towards an online submission of the project performance report, which hopefully will be launched in about 2 months from now. This will allow all the implementing entities to submit the project performance report in an online format, and in turn will also allow the Secretariat and the fund to conduct more comprehensive analysis on the actual impact of the portfolio. We are also developing a result-based management specifically for the innovation grants, so to capture any impact and result under the innovation window of the fund. And we are proposing also a further revision of the strategic results framework following the approval of the implementation plan of the new medium-term strategy, which actually will be discussed during the upcoming board meeting of the fund, which will be held in about a week from now. And the proposed revision in the results framework will most probably lean towards having more indicators related to gender and how to even better track the locally led impact of the interventions funded by the Adaptation Fund. And then lastly, there is a new evaluation policy, and there are now associated guidelines under development, which are of much relevance for all the implementing entities of the fund. Thank you so much. I will stop here, and please, if there are any questions, I think that you can share them in the chat box, and I will be happy to answer them in the Q&A session after the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Actually, there are a couple of questions that are being asked, so we'll try to respond to them in the Q&A. Without further ado, we'll have now the session, the panel discussion with our implementing entities on the ground. We'll have a chance to hear from our colleague Marinella Fuoli from Fonde Corporation, Ms. Mandy Burnett from South African National Biodiversity Institute, and Miriam De Vice from the AFCSO network. Let me pass over to my colleague Christina Dengel, who is the Knowledge Management Officer of the Adaptation Fund, to facilitate this session. Christina, over to you.
Thank you, Mohammed, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. It is my pleasure to moderate this discussion panel. We do have with us today, I know Mohammed mentioned the names, but it's 2 representatives from our national implementing entities, South Africa and Costa Rica, as well as the representative of the Adaptation Fund CSO network. I have a set of questions for you, which will help guide the discussion. But in the interest of time, I would like to limit your interventions to about 10 minutes to allow for enough time for discussion and for a Q&A, for the Q&A session at the end. I will bounce back between you so we don't make it very monotonous. I see all three of you are connected with the video on. Perfect. So I will start with Mandy then. So Mandy, can you please share with us briefly the project objective, perhaps the title and the project objective?
Sure, and Christina, good evening for us, to everybody who's joined us. I think for me to tell you the objective, I need to tell you a little bit about the story and how the very first Enhanced Direct Access project was born. So SANBI was accredited as the national implementing entity for the Adaptation Fund for South Africa all the way back in 2011. And we began a consultation process to ask our stakeholders what they wanted us to do in terms of responding. What did they want the projects to be about? And we convened a national meeting and were very excited to announce to everyone that we were the direct access entity. And a number of community members, women in particular, said to us, what do you mean direct access if it's millions of dollars going to government? Direct access means that you give us the resources to directly do what we want to do in response to climate change. And it wasn't called it at the time, but that was when Enhanced Direct Access was born, because we thought, okay, let's see if we can make a small grant facility that does this exact things, tries to get money to the ground. And so the Community Adaptation Small Grant Facility project was conceptualized, and the objective of the project was to bring climate finance in packets of around $100,000 each. So it wasn't tiny for community level. It actually turned out to be quite substantial for the community level. But the idea was to bring packages of that amount of climate finance into communities to support the communities to respond to climate change in ways that they had identified themselves. So tangible, direct adaptation measures that we would be able to measure at the end in terms of enhanced resilience or improved adaptive capacity. And the project implemented across a range of windows that were identified through the local level vulnerability assessments that were undertaken as part of preparation.
Thank you, Mandy. Can you highlight the best practices and some of the lessons learned that came with implementing an EDA project, an Enhanced Direct Access? And from your experience with the implementation of this project, what were the clear advantages? And you mentioned some of implementing an EDA project where financial flow happens directly at the local level.
Okay, so let me start off by just reflecting on something that Miko said in his opening remarks, which is that we learned a lot of lessons. It was quite a challenging experience for us. And we're very grateful to the Adaptation Fund for being open to the learning that happened along the way, because there was a lot of adaptive management and a lot of changing course as we figured this out. And, you know, really what it was about was bringing together climate adaptation people, small grant people, and community development people into one space. And expecting that they would all, you know how to work together. And of course they didn't. So a lot of what we learned was that these systems are complicated. They require interventions at all levels of the system. It requires incredible partnerships and people to work together, and it requires time. Importantly, devolving decision-making, we believe, is absolutely critical. I could talk for a long time about why Enhanced Direct Access is important for sustainability and for local agency and for being real in terms of what the challenges are on the ground. And so we know we need to do this. The question is really how. Holistic approach is something I've spoken about a little bit already, that you need to look at the whole system when you do Enhanced Direct Access. You can't just look at the community level, because it's the whole system that supports the finance getting to the ground and the whole system that supports the sustainability of the interventions long term. We need to be building capacity at all levels, individual and institutional capacity at all levels. So at the level of the communities themselves, at the often the community organizations that support the communities, then the intermediaries that support those, sub-national government and national government, all of it needs to be aligned with what we're trying to do, and capacity is needed at all those different levels. An important insight for us was the importance of building on what there is already and recognizing institutional capabilities where they exist, but also local and indigenous knowledge. Because of course, there's a lot of that on the ground. And sometimes the way we enter communities can be intimidating, but if we find the right words to ask communities how climate change is affecting them and how they want to be supported to respond, they will be able to respond. So there's a lot of lessons in that as well. A lot of lessons around giving enough time for this process and being flexible. It takes a long time to build capacity, and we're building capacity not just to deal with climate change, but to deal with managing money, managing people, reporting, all of these different elements that go into this work. And flexibility is important because as we learn, we need to adapt and change. And that requires a lot from our systems that can often be very cumbersome and very bowed down by the policy environments that often govern them. Then two more points, just monitoring, evaluation, and learning throughout. We need to be putting our learning programs in right from the beginning, and if they can be supportive and enabling and reflective and kind, I think that is what we need to be doing. And finally, this costs a lot of money. And I think we need to recognize that all of the actors that work at the subnational level to bring the finance to the ground are part of the system. It's not appropriate for local communities to interface directly with the big global funds because they will be squashed in an instant. And so we need to invest in the systems that will allow the funds to flow in a kind and responsive way. And then, of course, the costs of that are higher than if we're just building, big national infrastructure interventions. And I think the funds need to recognize that EDA and locally led adaptation, if done properly, costs money. But in the end, when you look at the long-lasting impacts and the sustainability, hopefully that return on investment can be justified.
Thank you, Mandy. I'm moving on to Marianela. Can you also share with us briefly about the project objective in Costa Rica?
Thank you, Cristina. Our project in Costa Rica, called Adaptados, is focused in reducing vulnerability, especially in three sectors: in the food sector, agro sector, on water systems also, and in coastal management zones. And it does have a very strong capacity building across component across all of the project. And it pretty much also, and I just want to add something on how it was born, because when Mandy was sharing on how theirs was born, I think there is a very interesting coincidence here. And is when we were, if we go back, and it's almost a decade now, we were also just recently being accredited, and we were very happy with it. And then we met with a lot of organizations. And we, as Fondo de Cooperación, since we were born in 94, we've always been very strongly working in different, with a lot of different organizations. So we were also wondering, well, how do we implement this, making the most of the involvement possible? And we were struggling with that. And there was this activity organized by the Adaptation Fund, and that it's, and I think that this is very relevant on the Adaptation Fund, that it has been focused in strengthening capacity of the NIEs and the direct access. So I participated in this activity a lot of years ago, well, 10 years ago or something. And then I met with Mandy, and we were struggling with that. And then Mandy told us, oh, we're doing this in South Africa. And we said, well, then we'll go for it too. So it is very interesting. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. Well, I know Mandy knows, but it was catalyzed on this going into the EDA and going after the experience of or the lead of Zambia at that time, and we said, well, we want to do that too. And I think one of the interesting things it was the Adaptation Fund at that time was, okay, this is not how we do it, but we're open for it. So this is, and I want to join the words of Mandy saying that we are also very happy and very impressed with and how relevant the partnership with the Adaptation Fund has been on this opening to innovation and learning, and let's try, okay, let's go, we're open to try different options. So that's how the EDA project, it was not called EDA either at that time, but we have a project that it has more than 40 different executing entities, 52 actually at this moment. And that was a greater challenge, but then at the end, as Mandy says, that is so much better in terms of involvement of the communities, because at the end, the adaptation practices, it's not just like one general thing. Things need to be adapted to the local conditions. So you need to involve the local organizations and all of the different actors and stakeholders within the organization to actually be part of the decision making in the adaptation. So that's how pretty much we build the project and have been working since.
Thank you, Marianela. Moving back to Mandy, I just would like to ask, implementing an LLA project doesn't come without challenges, and you've mentioned a few, but can you please tell us which are the enabling factors in terms of monitoring or institutional setting and whatnot for sustainable, impactful finance flow and interventions at the local level?
So I'll turn it around, Christina, and say, I think for effective enhanced direct access and effective MEL, it's very important to design the systems from the beginning that are mindful of the kinds of capacities that there will be on the ground, so that the overall experience of everyone is one that is positive. I think when systems are too complicated and too burdensome on the local actors, we can end up with a whole lot of unintended impacts. And so I think for me that's what comes up most strongly about monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And of course, we need to resource it properly. Excuse me, I'm at home in the evening and there's dogs and children making a bit of a noise. So yeah, I'd say the most important thing would be to be mindful of what's required from the outset, design it with the local actors in mind, and then resource it properly. So, we don't make assumptions that people have got time to do reporting when they're needing to be doing other things. And then another thing that's coming up for me now is we made a whole lot of assumptions about everybody wants to receive money and be a grant recipient and work with the grants themselves. And there was a big finding that actually people don't. People want to be supported to do the adaptation responses that they want, but not necessarily to be burdened with the receiving of the money and the reporting and all of the other complexity goes with that. So I think that's something always to check. Not to take it away from the communities who are wanting to develop those skills, because for sure there are some. But don't assume that local farmers who are struggling with climate change want to open bank accounts and report on expenditure. They don't. They want seeds and boreholes and support with their farming activities. And so I think it talks a lot to how do we build these systems so they can be enabling of the experiences of those, in this case, local farmers, without expecting them to become proficient in Microsoft Excel, for example.
That's a very good point there, and that's something that should be taken into consideration and at project design as well. I'm going to move on to Mariam, who is from the Green Alternative NGO in Georgia. Mariam, the role of the civil society in the monitoring of an LLA project is crucial. So can you please share with us what are the practical challenges, but also opportunities to be involved and contribute to an efficient monitoring of LLA initiatives on the ground?
Hello, everyone. It's a great honor to have this opportunity to contribute this valuable panel discussion. I represent NGO from Georgia and also Adaptation Fund CSO network, and it's so interesting having this different experiences, what Mandy and Marianela just mentioned, and the perspective I usually take is different. So really useful to share our experience and approaches. I would like to also reflect about the direct access based on Georgian case, because it seems really we have really different contexts. For example, Georgia, we don't have national implementing entity, and while discussing about locally led adaptation, it's also, I have the impression that sometimes it's a buzzword, but for me it's really useful process. So for me it means adaptation actions which are owned and led by local people in their own context, which welcomes diversity and curiosity towards all sorts of initiatives. So in Georgia, unfortunately, the whole adaptation process, my impression is that it's globally led rather than calling it locally led. It's the good illustration would be how my country engages with the Adaptation Fund, for example. The first project, which was supported by Adaptation Fund, was implemented by UNDP, United Nations Development Program. Then we have a current program going on by, again, International Implementing Entity, IFED. And since the country cap was increased, then IFED again, now it's already submitted. IFED submitted another proposal to implement another project for Georgia. And of course, it goes through the official national process. So my designated authority also endorsed the project. But my concern is what are the approaches some of the countries, including mine, is taking, instead of prioritizing enhancing direct access, which would be another step for enhancing locally led adaptation, they chose probably easier road to having international implementing entity and implement the projects through them. But there are also another ideas that it happens probably because we have lack of capacities, institutional capacities, I mean. So we are not able to have our national implementing entities and so on. But it was just to mention that we are struggling at this point, which defines which direction we are taking and how civil societies are also engaging through this process. And other national processes are also really challenging. For example, we don't have national adaptation plan yet that would help us to follow the priorities of the state and also to have framework for monitoring missions. So there are many other aspects, but I will wait for your another question. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one last question for Marianela. We know that the project implementation arrangements, they're quite unique for the Costa Rica project, as you have more than 40, I've noted, but now I know more than 52 executing agencies or entities. Can you share any challenges and opportunities in carrying out the monitoring of this project, and how an efficient monitoring allowed to identify successful interventions, which are now being scaled up with the second project, the Adaptation, Adaptaos Phase 2?
Thank you, Cristina. Yes, there's definitely a lot of challenges and learnings from the process. For us, it was very, we dedicate a lot of time into the designing of the project, but also understanding that it has been a very strongly focused adaptive process, a management process. We did part of the key elements, I would say, that we did and we are doing and still improving as when we look into this scaling up phase is first dedicate a lot of efforts on capacity building at the different levels, not just at the community level, but the executing entity level, also involving other allies or stakeholders that are relevant to that, and also working also at the NIE level. So we need to work a lot into the capacity building, and it's a continuous process. And it's also a continuous process on innovation. So first, the first tools for monitoring, of course, it was we designing a lot, a strong integrated Excel management, and that was linked to the PPR that Martina just presented and everything. We soon realized that it was a little bit too complicated for the executing entities. So we've been in a process of improving that and making it more simple, but or at least more or less complicated, but having the information, because at the one of the challenges of having so many projects and so many executing entities is that at the end you need to be able to integrate all of the information and monitoring and everything, and that has been a learning from our part on improving the tool and making it simple but robust at the same time. We have at some point even shared with Zambi and other NIEs on different tools, or how are you keeping track on the policy, ESP and gender policy risk and some of that. So there has been some of exchange, learnings exchange also between NIEs. I think another key element is having close communication. We have dedicated a lot of efforts into the adaptados and also into the scaling up on the designing the inception part phase that we're conducting now. A lot of efforts in communication and understanding communication on the different stakeholders and the different levels. And it's not just communication on tools and learnings and results, but it's more into how to keep track and have a good close and because one of the challenges is, since you have a lot of executing entities, you can go for it's like the communication, it's not so close, but no, the focus is how do you make it a very close communication even though you have so many stakeholders to keep track of. So that is part of our goal and challenge is getting closer communication, and so that needs planning and follow up and activities and all of that. So making sure that communication is part of this day-to-day planning. Another important issue is that the role of the NIE, and I think Mandy mentioned a little bit, but I want to really strengthen that on the role of the NIE on facilitating, on catalyzing things, on connecting things, because another of the challenge of the having so many executing entities and so many projects is, well, you may end up with a lot of different projects, but not generating synergy and creating a whole national effort. So the role of the NIE is in making sure, and at least for us, it has been that making sure that things are connecting and learning from one project, it moves into other projects or it generates a scalability impact or a learning to other actors. That is very important on the role of the NIE. So learning, innovation, trying to, it's been a project that we started in 2015, and along the project, well, there is a lot of innovation, or even tools that are changing and use of technology. So we've been at the same time going with that. We have a learning grant that has been very important for us also into being able to improve some of the ways that we're doing this communication and these learnings. But this is a continuous process. It's even though it's kind of push, you have at some point to have pushes, but this needs to be all of the time. So I see it like perhaps I don't find the exactly English word, but it's more like leaps. You kind of go and a step, but it's kind of a continuous process. You need to do that, and yeah, I think those could be.
Thank you. Well, we no longer have any questions directly to you. And before I will recap some of the ideas and lessons that I've heard here, I would just like to encourage the audience to type some questions in the chat, in the Q&A section. I noticed there are a few already, but they're mostly to the secretary, and I think those have been answered. but please feel free to type in the Q&A and we, our panelists can address them, or even if there's further questions to the Adaptation Fund. So what I've heard from all of you in terms of the implementing an EDA project and working at the local level is really the importance of partnerships, the importance of time, dedicating sufficient time for capacity building, for training, for whatnot at all local levels. How important this EDA concept really is for the sustainability of the interventions. I've also heard about the holistic approach that needs to be put in place and probably already at the design stage with the local actors in mind, or with the modality of applying these interventions with the local actors in mind. I've also heard from both of you about the importance of building capacity at all levels, and not just national level, but also subnational and community level. And also the importance of indigenous knowledge, and to actually like build on what's already existing and not necessarily to start from scratch. The importance, of course, of flexibility and open-mindedness, and we're glad to hear that the Adaptation Fund is credited for that in the very beginning of these stages. And the importance of communication, and I know, Mandy, you've mentioned that several times during the sessions and seminars that we organize, the communication between all levels of the parties involved, and the role of the NIE, which all of you play in facilitating and reconnecting everything, especially in a project so complex as yours with so many executing entities involved. I'm wondering if anyone from the audience, let me see, there's a few Q&As that have appeared. There's one question from Vincent Gainey. I've asked many of these questions. I believe this was answered already. Because I lead an UK FCDO and support the LIFE program, and very much want to see how we can build synergies between these different climate finance instruments. Martina, I believe you answered this, or is it something that you would like to address? It's probably linked to his previous questions, or how are PPRs tailored to be accessible and usable by low capacity, local level organizations without imposing an onerous reporting burden. And that's something probably also you can speak to, like what, how we really tailor these PPRs to be really accessible to like the local level, or whoever fills them out at the local level, in the case of your projects. I don't know if any of you want to address that, how easy it was to, fill out the yearly required PPRs for your projects, Mandy or Marianela.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in, Christina. It got easier because the tools became familiar to us. The way that we tried to do it was to get our partners to complete as much as possible, so that the lessons and the risks and what was being reported brought that voice through. So that's how we did it. I can see that it's going online now, and I'm sure that will streamline things even further. Yeah, and I think the PPR experience in a way encapsulates what the challenge is with reporting, because we're all trying to, in the most succinct way possible, capture the juicy lessons. And of course, we don't manage to do that. We instead generate pages and pages and pages of documentation that, in the end, I don't know if anyone reads it. So, I think if I were to contribute anything to the PPR discussion, it would be to say to the fund, maybe there's space for simplifying. It does feel like there are a lot of words there. I'm not sure if they all get used, if they're all useful. And, while it got easier, I think for newcomers, it could be easier even from the beginning if it was made a bit more simple.
Thank you, Maddie. I'm sure the RBM team is taking that on board. Mohammed and Martina, you're connected. Mandy, anything from your side in terms of like filling out these PPRs and doing this at the local level, or having their contribution at the local level?
You said Mandy, but you meant Marianela, or just to confirm?
Apology. Marianela.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just didn't want to answer if you were asking Mandy. Yeah, we've seen the process. It has also gone easier for us as we go in as part of our learning. We're eager also to see this process going online, which I believe it's going to be an improvement for all of us. I like the idea of the PPR being accumulative, and also so you're building on the previous PPRs. I think that also generates an easier make it easier. But of course, it's a big project, so you need a lot of information, and you need a lot of learning from that. And I think that part of the key points perhaps could be, how do we make more learning from of it, or learning in terms of lessons and applying the lessons learned. We are doing it, of course, from our side, and I'm sure all of the NIEs are doing it from their side. But it's part of the continuous challenges. How do we integrate that into new opportunities for the future? But we're doing it, and we also like the idea that it's in a way that it's not just a big written long report. So that way that every section is managed. We like that. Yeah, it is big, but I mean, it's a big project at the end. So part of our challenge has been, and I think that we've also seen and find our way, is that since we're putting there the results of so many projects, sometimes some of the information kind of it's too summarized for us. But on the other way, it's part of it needs to come to this aggregated way to be able to. I mean, I imagine as we have to deal with a lot of different projects in Costa Rica, I can imagine that the adaptation fund at the same time needs to gather all of that information for all of the different projects around the country. So the world. I do understand the relevance of coming to this aggregated information. So we're just eager to see how we can best move into the online section of the PPR, and we'll like to see that.
Thank you, Maranella, and good to hear about from both of you the importance of simplification. I'm just wondering if there's any issues that you have at the local level with, related to languages, indigenous languages, and I know there was a big component in your project, but I assume in Zambia as well, like, how is that communication, and what is the easiness or difficulty of really dialoguing at the local level to extract all the information that actually needs then to go into the PPR? Has that been an issue at all?
Well, in our case, more than in indigenous language, it's more than all of the executed entities report to us in Spanish, and so we do. The information does not really come directly because we need the PPR is in English. So it takes a process of adapting and summarizing and also translating into English. But at the same, but the information is useful from the executing entities into producing that. So yeah, the language is a challenge, but again, I understand that at the end you need to have some standardized languages in the last summary. But the executing entities report to us in Spanish. All of the information, local information, is in Spanish.
Excellent, Mandy. Anything that you can share on this?
There we go. I think it's a great question. Absolutely. So in the projects, we had intermediaries that could speak the local languages. Reporting, however, was in English. So that is something that created challenges for people and really underscored why the right kind of intermediaries are absolutely critical in these processes. What we did try to do was to, well, not us, but successfully translated a number of the products into local languages. So the project summary that we produced at the end is in 3 languages. A number of the tools are in local languages. So we did that, but we didn't go as far as to allow reporting to be in multiple languages. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
Okay, great. Thank you. I would just like to give Mariam the last word, just maybe the opportunity to react to this importance of flexibility and simplification. Like, our procedures, the donors, in order to facilitate the, more dialogue and an easiness with the local actors. And then we will conclude the panel discussion.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I liked how you what emphasis did you make that we need holistic approach, like communication and all of these things. I wanted to add that we also need to shift in power dynamics and giving power to local communities to initiate the project ideas, give space them to use their traditional knowledge and so on. And sometimes what I see in my country and beyond, that they are and also IPCC reports mentioned this many times, that there are many structural problems that defines vulnerabilities of local communities. So, and which also then makes it difficult to monitor our success because, for example, now land management, natural resource management, deforestation, pollution, all these things undermines local communities' ability to adapt to climate change. So how are we gonna tackle all these problems? How are we gonna empower these communities, increase ownership of them, and how to integrate systemic approaches within the project to achieve the transformational change we are trying to achieve. So yeah, I understand the context is quite difficult to challenge, but yeah, all these things which we mentioned is just straightforward how to challenge these power dynamics we have, and flexibility, and also the monitoring and learning is really important. And I also think that we should include local communities in monitoring process. We are sometimes invited at monitoring meetings of the project, Adaptation Fund CSO network members, and we really appreciate this kind of collaboration to be strengthened. And we are always ready to also provide our input in the project designs or then evaluation or this kind of events that we are having now.
Thank you, Mariam, and thank you all of you. I see there are no further questions in the chat, so I would like to thank you for participating in the panel discussion. This will conclude this part, and I will give the word to my colleague Muhammad, who will offer some concluding remarks. Thank you all.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks everyone for this very rich panel discussion. I will not do justice to this panel and what has been said in the session, but I will do my best to raise some couple of points that have been discussed. First of all, as Miko has said at the beginning, the Adaptation Fund is going to start a new implementation plan of the new medium-term strategy from this year. And LLA, local lead adaptation, and the windows that goes with it are going to be a key feature of this MTS. So we'll be very happy to continue this work on the LLA. We have the MTS implementation plan going to our next board meeting next week, and we hope that we'll have more insight and detail from it that can be shared with you. As my colleague Catherine has posted in the chat, we have published a study on the fund works on the EDA and on LLA that is pretty old now. It's been published for I think 2 years ago, but it still captures some of the discussion that we had today. So feel free to download and to go through it if you haven't done so far. And we're taking on board many of those comments that have been made. The fund is already improving some of its reporting template to bring more flexibility and more options to make things more easy to feel. We understand the issue of the language. Although the PPRs are still received in English, we do provide our reporting in many languages. So far we have been providing the annual portfolio report in English, French, Spanish, and this year we have made a translation in Arabic. So we'll do our best to make sure that our funding, our reportings are accessible in many languages. Flexibility is an important part even at the design stage. And as you know, the Adaptation Fund really works on the basis of the country ownership. So we really leave to the countries the need to, or the decision to allocate funding. And EDA and located adaptation is something that we have been seeing more and more coming from the countries. So flexibility during design is something that we will continue to have. And in terms of reporting, of course, we believe that located adaptation involves some of the reporting that have to do with local actors. So we'll see to what extent our reporting can also capture some of this discussion we had today. Communication is key, as you have outlined in the discussion. The reportings are important in a way that they provide some of the results through communication channels, and we hope that through some events like today we'll be able to provide more insights from the fund work on EDA. Complementarity that came in many occasions, including in the chat. As you know, the Adaptation Fund works with other climate funds, including the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility and the Climate Investment Funds. We've been partnering with some of those funds in many ways. One of the things that we've done over the last few years is the establishment of the Committee of Practice of Direct Access entities. So we have some of our entities part of the CPDA that are present today, and we think that this CPDA is a good way to increase capacity of those local actors, including the national implementing entities. So although the CPA is not only designed for EDA or located adaptation, but we believe that this kind of platform can address some of the issue discussed today, including the need to bring capacity building for design and implementation. We also work with the Green Climate Fund, for example, on a scaling up framework, which allows the countries to access funding in a more smooth manner, including the scale up of a successful project that have been initially funded by the Adaptation Fund or the GCF. The scale up framework work in both ways. So either the project that have been initially funded by the Adaptation Fund can be scaled up by the GCF or the other one around. So we think that this is also something that can address the issue we have in terms of facilitating access to finance by local actors. I will stop here, and again, thank you for your time, and thanks again for the Global Oceanic Climate Conference for hosting us today, and we hope to continue this conversation even outside this session. Thanks again, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks.
Thank you.